Imagine finally quitting the worst job of your life and realizing you have absolutely no idea what comes next. That is more or less how the Exodus begins. For generations, Egypt had been the ultimate system, efficient, organized, ruthless. It ran on schedules, quotas, and productivity charts carved into stone. Everything worked smoothly, as long as you were not the one doing the work. The Israelites were. They were the invisible engine of the operation. Brickmakers, laborers, builders of monuments they would never own. Egypt functioned like a massive corporation built on a single principle: output mattered more than people. Then, one day, the workers walked out. Not slowly, not in stages, no exit interviews, no transition plan, just a sudden collective resignation. And yes, it looked like a victory, it just looked like one. From the outside, it felt historic. Chains broken, gates open, a nation finally free. From the inside, it felt more like quitting a toxic job without another offer lined up. The order to leave came fast. Too fast for planning, too fast for preparation. Pack up, go, now. They left so quickly that the bread did not even have time to rise. No waiting, no ovens, just flour, water, and urgency. Unleavened bread became the food of freedom, not because it was symbolic, but because there was literally no time for anything else. This was fast food by necessity, not by choice. People grabbed whatever they could carry. Families stayed close. Livestock moved in confused clusters. Nobody had a map. Nobody had a backup plan. Nobody really knew where they were going. They only knew where they could no longer stay. Egypt, for all its cruelty, had been predictable. There was food, limited but reliable. There was shelter. There was routine. Oppression, yes, but a familiar one. And familiarity has a strange way of feeling safe when the alternative is uncertainty. In modern terms, it was like a massive company entering crisis the moment its workforce resigned all at once. The system collapsed, but so did the structure that had quietly held everyone's life together. This was freedom, technically, but it arrived without instructions. No orientation, no onboarding, no helpful voice explaining what happens next. Just a long road stretching forward into territory no one had ever navigated. It was a mass resignation without savings, without Wi-Fi, without GPS, and without any clear idea of how long the journey would last. And yet, they moved. Because sometimes staying is no longer survivable, even when leaving feels reckless. As the dust settled behind them and the noise of Egypt faded into the distance, something uncomfortable became clear. Leaving was only the first step. Victory had been loud, direction had not. Freedom had shown up early. The manual had not. And when the cheering finally died down, a new question quietly replaced it. Now what? The problem with running fast is realizing someone might run after you. Not long after leaving Egypt, that realization hits hard. Behind them, dust rises on the horizon. Chariots, horses, armor catching the sun. The most powerful military force of the time, suddenly very motivated to undo a mass resignation they did not approve. Ahead of them is water, a lot of it. The Red Sea stretches forward with no visible crossing, no bridges, no boats, no helpful sign that says, emergency exit this way, just waves. To the left and right, more water and rough terrain. Behind them, an army that has changed its mind about letting them go. This is the part where collective confidence quietly evaporates. The excitement of freedom lasts exactly until the first impossible obstacle shows up. Panic spreads quickly. Voices rise. The same people who were celebrating days earlier are now doing the mental math. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe Egypt was bad, but at least it was predictable. Maybe quitting without a plan was not the bold move it felt like at the time. In modern terms, it is like deleting your entire old life, cancelling every backup option, and suddenly realizing there is no Wi-Fi, no signal, and no clear way out. Just vibes, bad ones. The crowd stops, the army keeps coming, time runs out. This is where the story could reasonably end. Instead, something unexpected happens. Moses steps forward. No long speech, no dramatic build-up. He raises the staff, and the sea opens, not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. Water pulls back. A dry path appears where there absolutely should not be one. Walls of water stand on either side like the laws of physics briefly stepped out for coffee. The ground is solid, walkable, real. The crowd freezes for a moment, because when reality breaks this hard, the brain needs a second to catch up. Then they move. Families rush forward, children run. Livestock follows. A massive group crosses straight through what used to be an uncrossable barrier. Fear turns into motion. Motion turns into escape. From the other side, the Egyptian army watches this unfold and reaches a very confident conclusion. Let's do that too. They charge in. Same path, same opening, same confidence. This turns out to be a poor decision, because copying something without understanding the context rarely works. The water closes, chariots vanish, horses disappear. The most advanced military force of the era is stopped by something it cannot intimidate, negotiate with, or overpower. Irony does the rest. Strength fails, control fails, strategy fails. The system that once dominated everything collapses in a single moment it cannot manage. Silence follows. No cheering, no victory speech. Just shock. They are alive. The threat is gone. The impossible has happened. Behind them, the sea looks normal again, as if nothing strange ever occurred. Ahead of them lies open land, empty, unknown. They have just witnessed the greatest miracle of their lives. And somehow that is not the strangest part, because after the biggest moment of divine intervention in the entire story, something completely unexpected is about to happen next. The moment the water closes, everything explodes into noise. People shout, someone laughs, someone cries. Others just breathe loudly, like they forgot how a few seconds ago. There is running, hugging, confused cheering, and the kind of chaos that happens when a crowd survives something it was fully prepared to not survive. And then, almost immediately, it stops. No music, no organized celebration, no grand plan for what a victory like this is supposed to look like. Just silence. The sea behind them looks calm, ordinary, and completely uninterested in what just happened. The army is gone. The threat is gone. The impossible problem has been solved. They are safe. And now, they are standing still. In modern terms, it is like winning a huge argument, slamming the door, walking away, and then getting home and realizing you have no idea what to do next. The adrenaline wears off. The noise fades, and the quiet shows up uninvited. The enemy is officially behind them. The future, however, is still missing. There are no signs pointing forward, no clear destination in sight, no follow-up miracle explaining the next step. Just open land, a lot of questions, and a group of people who suddenly realize they have never had to make decisions like this before. For years, someone else decided everything for them. Where to work, when to rest, what tomorrow looked like. Freedom sounded amazing in theory. In practice, it feels strangely empty without instructions. This is the awkward part nobody puts on posters. Victory without direction is uncomfortable. Someone eventually says it out loud, probably quieter than expected. Freedom arrived. Instructions did not. The moment lands harder than the miracle did, because miracles are great at fixing immediate problems. They solve crises, they remove danger, they open paths where none existed 5 minutes earlier. What they do not do is instantly build confidence, discipline, or maturity. Those things take time. And mistakes, and uncomfortable silence. Right now, all they know is that they survived. They do not yet know how to live differently. The habits of Egypt are gone, but nothing has replaced them. The structure that once controlled everything has vanished, and no new structure has appeared to take its place. So they wait. Some stare at the horizon, expecting the next dramatic event to show up on schedule. Others look back, half expecting Egypt to somehow reappear. A few start asking practical questions that nobody has answers to yet. How long are we staying here? Where are we going? What happens if something goes wrong again? The silence stretches, and in that quiet, something subtle begins to surface. Not fear exactly, not panic yet, just a growing discomfort with uncertainty. A realization that freedom is not just about escaping danger. It is about learning how to move forward without being pushed. The sea is gone. The enemy is gone. What remains is choice, and that turns out to be far more challenging than anyone expected, because it is in the silence, after the cheering, after the miracle, after the victory, that the real problem finally begins to show itself. Without Egypt, something new shows up. Insecurity. At first, it arrives quietly. No dramatic announcement. Just small problems stacking up. Food supplies run low. Water becomes harder to find. Certainty disappears completely. And suddenly the past starts looking comfortable. This is confusing for everyone involved because the past was terrible. It involved forced labor, control, and zero freedom. But it was also predictable. There were routines, there were rules, there was a system. Unfair, yes, but familiar. Out here there is none of that, no schedule, no structure, no clear answers, just questions that keep multiplying. What are we eating tomorrow? Where is the water coming from? How long is this supposed to last? Whose idea was this again? Complaints start circulating faster than directions ever did. It is not rebellion yet. It is something more human. Discomfort, anxiety. The growing fear of having to make decisions without a supervisor hovering nearby. Freedom, it turns out, requires participation. In modern terms, it is like leaving a toxic relationship and then catching yourself missing it. Not because it was good, but because it was predictable. You knew what to expect, you knew the rules, you knew where you stood, even if that place was miserable. Uncertainty is harder than oppression when you are not used to choosing. The complaints get louder. Some are practical, some are emotional, some are just loud thoughts looking for company. People start romanticizing Egypt in ways that would have been unthinkable a few weeks earlier. At least there was food, at least there was water. At least someone told us what to do. This is where fear sneaks in. Not fear of enemies, those are gone. This is fear of responsibility, fear of deciding, fear of discovering that freedom means there is no one else to blame when things go wrong. So they look to Moses, constantly. What now? Where next? What should we do? Dependence replaces initiative almost immediately. The same people who celebrated escape now wait for instructions before every move. They want freedom, but with step-by-step guidance and preferably a clear return policy. Someone eventually summarizes the situation with uncomfortable accuracy. They were physically free, but emotionally, they were still in Egypt. Their bodies had left. Their mindset had not. Years of control do not disappear overnight. Habits formed under pressure do not dissolve just because the environment changes. Slavery trained them to survive by obeying. Freedom demands something different. It demands trust. It demands patience. It demands growth. And growth is slower than miracles. The story quietly shifts here. Up until now, it has been about escape, getting out, surviving, avoiding danger. But something deeper is starting to take shape beneath the surface: frustration and constant complaining. This is no longer just a story about running away from Egypt. It is becoming a story about learning how not to carry Egypt with you. And from this point forward, the journey stops being about distance and starts being about transformation. By this point, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The Exodus was never just about leaving Egypt. It was about removing Egypt from the people. The story starts with a rushed escape. No planning, no preparation. Just a necessary exit from a system that could no longer be survived. Then comes the impossible miracle. Water opening, where water absolutely should not open. After that, the silence. The awkward pause where victory arrives but direction does not. And then the fear, the complaints, the hesitation, the need for someone else to decide what happens next. Each moment builds on the last. Leaving was fast. The miracle was dramatic. The silence was uncomfortable. The fear was constant. Together they reveal something important. Freedom without maturity turns into chaos. Independence sounds exciting until responsibility shows up with it. And responsibility, unlike miracles, does not arrive instantly or dramatically. It arrives slowly, quietly, usually through trial and error. That is the part nobody cheers for. In modern terms, it is like suddenly gaining financial freedom without knowing how to manage money. The freedom is real, the problems are new, and without discipline, planning, and growth, the gift becomes a mess surprisingly fast. The same thing happens here. The people are no longer controlled, but they are not yet self-directed. They are no longer trapped, but they are not prepared. They escaped oppression, but they did not immediately gain the skills needed to live freely. And that gap matters. Because liberation removes limits, maturity replaces them. Without that replacement, confusion takes over. Complaints grow louder, dependency sneaks back in. The same mindset that survived Egypt starts sabotaging life outside of it. This is why the story still works centuries later. People still confuse liberation with comfort. They still expect freedom to feel easy. They still assume that once the problem is removed, clarity will magically appear. It usually does not. Growth is slower than escape. Learning takes longer than surviving. And freedom, real freedom, demands more than just an exit. It demands change. The Exodus shows that leaving a bad situation is only the beginning. What follows is the harder work of becoming someone who can actually live differently. That is why the journey does not end at the sea. It moves into the desert, into laws, into structure, into learning how to choose wisely without being forced. Because the real victory was never the collapse of Egypt's power. It was the slow process of building something new. And that question still hangs in the air, waiting to be answered. What happens next? Is it the desert where patience is tested, the commandments where structure replaces chaos, or the promised land where freedom finally has somewhere to land? That depends on which part of the story you want to understand next.